an arrowhead skyscraper along 23rd Street, has anchored the Manhattan horizon for over 100 years. The Flatiron architectural icon. A masonry foundation, ceramic facades, a profile so distinct that toddlers identify it prior to discovering its title. There exist more snapshots of this unique monument than of nearly every other edifice on our planet. It features in movies, canvases, commercials. Designers research it. Travelers perform treks toward it. Conservationists struggled for ages to shield it from destruction. They triumphed. The landmark persisted, yet endurance is never identical to thriving. Starting 2019, Flatiron Tower has remained vacant, barred, dim, expectant. That is the narrative of what occurs once a symbol turns too precious for removal, yet too restricted for rescue. Introductory Passage 3. Prior the Flatiron edifice arriving, the site on the intersection of Fifth Avenue plus Broadway appeared regarded virtually worthless. The obstacle was mathematics. Manhattan got mapped during 1811 via a perpendicular lattice. Roads moved east toward west, boulevards moved south toward north. The layout operated flawlessly across all spots besides when historic slanted trails sliced across the fresh map. Broadway originated as a trail for the Lenape tribes, twisting beside a native crest throughout the aisle. As designers placed the mesh atop the current scenery, Broadway stayed. It gashed across the modern roads by a weird tilt, forming wedge parcels whenever it overlapped. Bulk of these zones remained tiny, clumsy. Speculators constructed on them if they needed, mostly short houses that never did necessitate intricate ground bases. Zero persons envisioned something vertical. The parcel by 23rd Street proved notably tough. It narrowed toward the southern limit of the sector, merely 29 feet broad at the tip. The foundation reached roughly 190 feet beside Broadway, plus 190 feet beside Fifth Avenue. The entire footprint measured a bit past 18,000 square feet. Such appeared significant until one viewed the geometry, a lengthy, thin sliver improper for regular workplace utility. During much of the 19th age, a short domestic house sat upon that location. Few folks regarded it exceptionally costly. The placement proved fine. Madison Plaza resided exactly one street toward the north. The district lured cinemas, bistros, plus inns, yet the form of the site alone deterred major corporate focus. Typical workplaces required quadrilateral layouts. Decorations suited flat partitions. Occupants desired normal suites. The wedge provided zero of such. All shifted during 1899. The George A. Fuller firm operated a building corporation from Chicago which focused on internal frame assembly. They utilized metal grids rather than heavy brick barriers to support an edifice's mass. The technique permitted higher skyscrapers utilizing fewer supplies. Fuller finished several of Chicago's loftiest towers during the 1890s for the 19th era. Today, they sought a main office within New York City, which could herald their arrival. Harry S. Black managed the group following Fuller's passing during 1900. Black recognized the worth for magnificent design. A tower functioned not solely a spot for labor, it served as marketing. A buyer who viewed a grand home base of a building enterprise might rely upon its skills. Black searched for a spot which might prove what the business could erect atop unreachable soil. The wedge by 23rd Street matched ideally. The corporation bought the parcel during 1901. The cost stays unlisted within archival records, yet subsequent stories imply the owners took a small amount, believing nobody else might bid more toward this bizarre plot. Black swiftly commissioned a designer. The pick appeared certain. Daniel Burnham had earned a status as among America's very famous urban planners. Burnham drafted several towers for the Globe's Columbian Fair at Chicago during 1893. The snowy metropolis, while the event got titled, demonstrated billions of guests what masonry could accomplish as imagination joined mechanics. Following the exhibition, Burnham obtained projects from throughout the nation. His creations merged ancient dimensions along modern alloy assembly. Customers believed that he might provide both elegance plus durability. As Black reached him regarding the wedge parcel task, Burnham greeted the trial lacking any delay. The hurdle was never altitude. Metal assembly might manage 22 levels lacking any hardship. The issue stayed the bottom. The thin edge of the site necessitated a base which might scatter mass uniformly over a tiny zone. Burnham labored along technicians for a fix, utilizing low metal stakes fixed inside Manhattan's solid stone. The skeleton could transport the pressure downward rather than outward. The exterior created different trials. Burnham selected a Parisian revival manner which highlighted upright trails plus traditional scales. The bottom shall be built from Indiana quarry, the identical resource utilized within several elite edifices of that era. The higher levels should get ceramic skin, a nimble substance which can be shaped to complex motifs plus heated for heat protection. Ceramics priced lower than rock, yet generated a comparable optic result from afar. Journals tracking the venture started utilizing a moniker, Burnham's Mistake. The title implied the designer had assumed an unreachable mission which could conclude as disaster. Pundits signaled toward the thin base. Gales hitting the high partitions could produce massive pressures. The tower perhaps falls during a heavy breeze or gale. The doubt felt natural. New York previously possessed many high towers, yet zero got constructed upon such a peculiar site. Assembly commenced during 1901. Teams dug the base, slicing across debris plus silt to find the solid stone beneath. Alloy stakes got pounded low. Cement got dumped near them, forming a firm foundation. Metal pillars started soaring within the first weeks of 1902. The skeleton ascended fast, level after level, until the monument towered over Madison Plaza. Burnham managed each aspect. Ceramic tiles got crafted toward his requirements. Panes were fitted to optimize organic rays while shielding the inside against warmth. A lift accessed every 22 levels. Vapor radiators plus current piping offered ease for eventual occupants. The tower formally debuted upon the 1st for October 1902. Uncertainty evaporated instantly. The landmark stayed steady. The gusts that blew across Madison Plaza never did capsize the edifice. Rather, they generated something unforeseen. A breeze corridor result. Atmosphere hurried along as it shifted beside the tower's thin profile. Ladies walking on the pavement sensed abrupt drafts which raised their dresses. Youthful guys started huddling by the intersection to observe. Patrols needed to scatter them, allegedly utilizing the term 23 skidoo. The idiom joined American vernacular, while its precise root stay argued between scholars. Pictures increased very quickly. The tower form appeared picturesque from each perspective. Cameramen queued inside Madison Plaza, plus recorded the entire wedge. Rest filmed from road height, stressing way the monument ascended past its environment. Alfred Stieglitz, among America's very powerful cameramen, created numerous portrayals of that Flatiron during 1903. His snapshots aided defining the tower as a creative theme, not only a mechanic's curiosity. Artists contributed their personal perspectives. Edward Steichen produced moody portrayals revealing the edifice shrouded within mist. Alvin Langdon Coburn filmed it during twilight once lamps inside beamed across the panes. John Sloan illustrated the scene from his workshop frame, depicting the Flatiron towering over the plaza. After a small period, the tower featured in more pieces of creativity than many monuments which had stood for ages. The Fuller business held various levels toward its personal workplaces. The leftover rooms got leased to agencies desiring a high-class location. Editors became notably intrigued. Thin suites fitted businesses which required area for tables plus storage bins instead of huge vacant zones. The periodic fee was reasonable given such a high-status placement. The tower occupied fast. The edifice, which was presumed to be a failure, turned an immediate symbol. Burnham demonstrated that a hopeless site might support incredible masonry. Black received precisely what he sought, a promotion which heralded the Fuller Enterprises' talent to all travelers through Madison Plaza. The title Flatiron Tower superseded the formal moniker Fuller Edifice within public. The shape established the brand. Chapter 1 for 7. The metal skeleton assembly which rendered the Flatiron Tower feasible remained a fairly fresh innovation during 1902. Classic high houses depended on heavy brick partitions to support the weight. The loftier the edifice, the denser these barriers needed to exist by the bottom. The technique forced a realistic cap for altitude. The bottom partitions grew so massive that they consumed the first level zone, converting the area into something mostly worthless. A metal frame operated uniquely. Upright pillars plus sideways girders created a mesh which bore the whole mass. The outer barriers turned a veil draped atop the skeleton instead of a weight-bearing system, which permitted designers to construct loftier, lacking wasting internal level room. William LeBaron Jenney, utilized this technique for the home insurance tower within 1885. Commonly viewed as the initial skyscraper across America, around the period the George A. Fuller Enterprise engaged Burnham, frame assembly had demonstrated its safety in scores of towers. Flatiron utilized metal pillars scattered over the whole wedge-shaped lot. Girders joined these pillars, forming a stiff skeleton for each level. Cement-level plates sat atop the girders. The entire monument shifted its mass down via the pillars toward bases fixed within Manhattan stone. The outer veil barriers got fastened against the metal skeleton, yet they bore no engineering pressure. The selection for ceramics toward the top exterior mirrored functional thoughts. The substance sat airier than rock, decreasing the net mass the frame needed to carry. Pottery might be carved into ornate shapes prior heating, allowing designers versatility with style. Following heating at great heat, the resource turned flame-proof, a vital aspect during an age while tower blazes stayed a chronic danger. Indiana quarry covered the 4 bottom levels, offering a firm, classic foundation that signaled strength plus status. Burnham drafted the exterior with 3 upright tiers. The foundation reached over 4 levels, using rock partitions plus huge main-level panes for stores. The central part soared between the 5th toward the 18th level, once ceramics mimicked pillar-style motifs, which lent the edifice a lofty highlight. Generally viewed as the premier skyscraper across America, around the moment the George A. Fuller Enterprise engaged Burnham, frame building had demonstrated its safety in scores of structures. Flatiron utilized alloy pillars dispersed throughout the entire triangular parcel area. Beams joined those pillars, forming a stiff grid on every level. Cement floor tiles rested on the girders. The whole edifice channeled its mass downward via the pillars into bases fixed in Manhattan stone. The outer veil walls were fastened to the metal skeleton, yet they bore no engineering pressure. The selection of ceramics for the top exterior reflected utilitarian considerations. This substance was lighter than rock, decreasing the net mass the frame needed to carry. Ceramics could be carved into decorative shapes prior heating, allowing designers versatility with style. Following heating at high heat, the resource turned flame-proof, a vital aspect during an age while tower blazes stayed a chronic danger. Indiana quarry covered the 4 bottom levels, offering a firm, classic foundation that signaled strength plus status. Burnham drafted the exterior with 3 upright tiers. The foundation reached over 4 levels using rock partitions, plus huge main-level panes for stores. The central part soared between the 5th toward the 18th level, once ceramics mimicked pillar-style motifs which lent the edifice a lofty highlight. The peak featured the last 4 levels with extra fancy ceramics plus a jutting ledge which finished the monument. That arrangement felt traditional in scale despite the fact that components and the building process remained contemporary. Glass occupied much of the outer skin. Business towers demanded plenty of organic rays. Power functioned, yet it stayed costly plus temperamental. Occupants desired zones where folks might labor via sunshine during much of their shift. Burnham situated these frames to optimize solar contact whilst preserving the engineering safety for the exterior. Dense metal window borders split every gap into tinier sheets which would endure gust force at such altitude. This breeze hurdle felt authentic. Madison Plaza stayed an airy zone ringed with towers which directed current drifts. As air hit the thin north tip of Flatiron, it sped along the flanks, forming heavy drafts by the bottom. That impact remained vivid enough that strollers observed. Tabloids chronicled events where caps were ripped away from folks' crowns. Ladies gripped onto their gowns. Adolescent males, per previous remarks, huddled to witness this spectacle till the law stepped in. Indoors, the level schemes mirrored those trials, forced via that 3-sided geometry. 0 levels provided these square suites bulk agencies favored. Rather, every level possessed lengthy, thin hallways stretching from the broad south boundary toward the thin northern apex. Workspaces bordered these halls, each occupying a tiny portion of the total span. Suites by the north tip remained so puny they might house merely a solitary table plus a file bin. Such peculiar math deterred certain entities. Organizations which desired huge airy zones for divisions containing numerous workers could never utilize these wedge levels effectively, yet others felt this scheme functioned nicely. Editors, legal groups, designers, plus experts operating within tiny squads viewed those thin bureaus appropriate. This Madison Plaza tag provided status. That fee appeared fair relative toward different contemporary workplace towers. This spot offered simple entry into mass transit plus eateries. This fuller enterprise held various levels for its New York home base. The leftover rooms became leased toward diverse occupants. Near 1905, that tower stood nearly entirely taken. Landlords possessed zero difficulty locating agencies eager to ignore this clumsy scheme and trade for a placement within New York's most famous edifice. This monument's public debut during 1902 created a permanent icon. Strollers utilized it as a compass point while providing paths. Snapshots increased, souvenirs showcasing Flatiron moved via those thousands. Editors featured photos of the tower within travel manuals plus flyers pitching Manhattan as a contemporary world city. That wedge profile remained immediately known even for folks which had never toured the town. Creators continued illustrating plus filming the monument for decades. Every interval provided a fresh tone. Cold draped the ceramics via frost. April cast gentle rays over Madison Plaza. Fall sunsets dyed the exterior within bronze plus crimson. Zero dual portrayals were alike. This tower shifted with the climate, the hour of shift, plus the camera perspective. Professional shots discovered infinite themes within the Flatiron. This tower's triumph proved various points. Initially, a site viewed as worthless might house anything amazing, provided the designer grasped physics. Next, status possessed financial worth. Occupants funded for that Madison Square 23 tag, even if the level scheme appeared awkward. Last, the citizens cheered toward brave design. Burnham's mistake turned a symbol, not despite its weird form, but due to it. During the initial 2 decades, the monument operated precisely as Black sought, a promotion for that Fuller Group's talent, a lucrative asset for its masters, a token of Manhattan modernity for the general public. Contracts settled. Care stayed fairly simple. This metal frame never did necessitate those types of fixes which dense brick barriers could have called for. That ceramic exterior braved the climate nicely. Zero heavy catastrophes hit the frame. Blazes which ruined different New York towers bypassed Flatiron. Ceramics plus alloy assembly offered flame safety which vintage timber houses lacked. This lift seldom failed ever. Vapor warmth operated throughout the cold. That tower necessitated the same daily care as any big business asset, yet nothing further. During the 1920s, the Flatiron was part of the New York horizon already. Fresh, higher towers climbed within Manhattan. This Empire State Monument started framing during 1929, plus debuted in 1931, hitting a peak of 281 meters. That Chrysler Tower topped 300 meters. Flatiron at 77 meters was no longer even near that loftiest, yet it stayed the most filmed. High enough to rule its space at Madison Plaza, yet not so high that it abandoned a human scale. This shape persisted. Part 2 for 7. During the initial 60 seasons of its life, that Flatiron Tower throbbed with activity. Occupants moved in and out, yet the tower stayed almost completely leased for much of that time. Those types of agencies which took space mirrored New York's wealth plus the growth of U.S. commerce. Bookmakers ruled those early years. Businesses like the Frank Munsey firm held numerous level areas. Munsey distributed zines plus journals, including Munsey's Weekly, which hit a reach of 600,000 during its height. Press rooms fitted the Flatiron's thin suites quite nicely. Writers required tables, keys, plus storage bins. They did not require huge airy zones. That Madison Plaza 23 tag lent trust toward their works. Design groups likewise leased room. This humor felt deliberate. Designers might prove guests that folks labored within one of America's most celebrated towers, which indicated a grasp of fine craft. Those thin suites gave them seclusion for meetings, while the presence of boardroom space permitted shows plus critiques. Cameramen held workshops upon those top levels. Organic rays hitting through these panes remained perfect for images plus trade tasks. One central New York spot meant guests might simply arrive for shoots. Certain artists focused upon vistas from those Flatiron's panes, marketing photos of Madison Plaza toward travelers and collectors. Attorneys managed bureaus from that tower. Tiny groups held solitary rooms. Big ones leased whole levels. One legal library within the edifice aided numerous occupants, which split the fee of keeping that archive. That hallway scheme permitted private entry inside distinct rooms, anything guests wanting secrecy valued. During the 1930s, that client blend stayed alike. Artistic trades, expert groups, agencies which sought a grand tag but not huge level zones. That Flatiron never did fight against newer towers for total volume. Rather, it provided something different. Soul, lineage, fame. That great slump hit rental trends, yet not quite as harshly as folks might guess. Certain groups folded. Remaining shrank their area, yet the tower stayed catchy enough that landlords located fresh guests for empty rooms. Fee remained fluid during lean years. Landlords liked receiving less cash over long gaps for vacancy. That Second World War sparked another transition. State bureaus rented workplace room throughout Manhattan for Army tasks. The Flatiron held many smaller bureaus linked toward that battle effort. Once the combat concluded, those areas shifted toward non-military utility. That post-war wealth yielded one fresh surge for trade occupants. During the 1950s, that monument stood 50 seasons old. That alloy frame stayed firm. That ceramic exterior had lasted nicely, although certain tiles required swaps where dampness induced many splits. Utility grids started displaying their vintage years. Lifts needed more regular fixes. Vapor warmth still functioned, yet it stayed less brisk than fresh setups. Pipes sometimes broke. Landlords funded toward care, yet not for huge upgrades. That math never did favor big capital works. This tower yielded constant fee revenue along low care bills. Drastic changes could have priced millions plus potentially forced evacuating occupants while doing work. That hazard felt unearned. Historic ranks surfaced as one topic during the 1960s. New York was shedding design icons within an alarming speed. Pennsylvania Hub, one Beaux-Arts gem crafted via McKim, Mead plus White, got leveled during 1963 despite huge general outcry. That wrecking ignited rage plus moved advocates to seek legal shields toward vital towers. This New York City Landmarks Preservation Board was born during 1965. That following year, the Flatiron Tower gained historic rank status. This rank shielded that tower against wrecking and called for board consent toward any big edits for that exterior or vital inside parts. Landlords might not just level the site, even if that soil turned more costly than its frame. That rank offered safety, yet it similarly placed caps. Fixes called for consent. Edits toward the exterior were tied within review. Landlords needed to keep that outer look aligned along the early layout. Those laws made sense starting a heritage point of view. They shielded the wedge symbol against that bad choice from future buyers, yet they similarly cut agility. Contemporary workplace wants started to drift from what that Flatiron might ever offer. Agencies sought airy level schemes. Hardware necessitated unique power grids plus ventilation. Chilled air turned one necessity, not any perk. The Flatiron possessed tiny suites, vintage cables, plus fickle chilled air setups. Rebuilding such grids could have forced cutting within masonry, plus placing fresh pipes throughout that monument. In the 1970s and 80s, various rooms grew harder to lease. Huge enterprises desiring contemporary work zones moved away. Tiny agencies which never did necessitate peak-level grids still leased within that Flatiron. Movement felt varied. Various intervals saw fresh guests, others saw exits. Landlords operated that tower successfully, yet margins thinned. The tower's cultural weight never faded. Movies utilized the Flatiron as one stage for New York scenes. Snapshots yet graced travel guides, wall sheets, plus marketing. Creators illustrated it. Design pupils analyzed its blueprints. Travelers visited Madison Plaza explicitly for viewing it. Zero different monument across Manhattan, potentially besides that Statue of Liberty plus the Empire State Landmark, gained such immediate fame, yet celebrity fails paying repair costs. Throughout those 1990s, the edifice required major care. To loosen, posing hazards for strollers to loosen, posing hazards for strollers underneath. Temporary staging arose around portions of that skin while fixing. Indoors, those lifts necessitated total swapping. That initial equipment fitted at building remained functional during almost 1 century. One amazing proof toward their grade. Yet folks might not operate indefinitely. Fresh lifts necessitated current engines, cars, plus management rigs. This labor remained pricey plus intrusive for occupants. Power plus water grids likewise called for improvements. That early cabling had never been intended to manage hardware, copier machines, plus remaining digital gear which occupied contemporary bureaus. Landlords placed fresh lines via current ducts and hallways where feasible, yet one total revamp would have necessitated piercing partitions throughout that monument. Control shifted parties numerous turns during the final eras of that 20th age. Every fresh buyer during those 1990s received the identical group of hurdles. One elite placement, legendary masonry, vintage grids, restricted agility owing to historic rank. Fee revenue stood steady, yet never marvelous enough to warrant those tens of millions called for toward one total overhaul. Around that close for the 1990s, the trend remained obvious. This Flatiron edifice stood cheered in general, yet ignored in secret. Every person adored that landmark. Minimal folks desired to fund toward mending it. Postponed care tasks accumulated high. That crisis turned harsher with each season. Segment 3 of 7. Around the dawn of the 21st age, that Flatiron Tower encountered fresh trials. Contemporary workplaces called for utility which a tower from 1902 had never gotten intended to supply. Airy level schemes turned the standard. Entities sought zones where scores of workers might cooperate lacking any tangible blocks. That Flatiron's lengthy, thin hallways bordered via tiny bureaus upon either flanks embodied the precise reverse of what current occupants stood hunting for. This warmth, airflow, plus chilled air grids hardly operated. That early vapor warmth yet functioned, yet it remained noisy, wasteful, and unreachable to manage level via level. Cooling had been fitted part via part over generations, forming a jumbled rig which yielded irregular outcomes. Certain bureaus stayed extra warm during August, rest stayed extra chilly during January. Occupants grumbled constantly. This power cabling might not manage the energy needs for contemporary gear. Bureaus stuffed with hardware, hosts, inkjets, plus remaining gadgets called for more lines than that tower possessed. Landlords placed fresh wires where folks might, yet one total revamp would have called for ripping into partitions plus roofs throughout that monument. That price should have stayed immense. This disturbance for occupants would have remained major. That piping displayed its years. Tubes fitted during that early building had lasted notably long, yet zero persists eternally. Spills turned more common. Liquid force wavered. Certain bathrooms possessed gears elder than bulk occupants. Swapping that net water rig would have implied piercing partitions upon each level, one mission matching toward recreating the net monument from those insides. These lifts yet functioned following their swap during the 1990s, yet the count of cars itself stood a hurdle. That tower possessed merely 4 units, helping 22 levels. Amid peak shifts, laborers lingered various moments for one car. Contemporary workplace towers provided extra units plus swifter transit intervals. Zero tangible fix resided for that Flatiron. There stayed zero area to fit extra lift chutes lacking wrecking vital engineering parts. Control shifted to Harry Macklowe, one famous Manhattan land builder during the 1990s. Macklowe grasped both that worth plus the hurdle. That tower resided atop 17,000 square feet for some of that peak-cost soil within New York. Even via its tough math, that parcel stayed valued tens of millions. Yet historic rank implied folks could not just wreck that frame and begin anew. Macklowe weighed one shift toward luxury apartments. Elite residences within the very legendary tower across Manhattan might vend for startling fees. That spot stood ideal. Vistas from those top levels captured Madison Plaza plus one massive part of Manhattan. That vintage status would contribute one worth which fresh towers might never rival. This scheme hit toward instant blocks. That heritage board would need to permit any big inside edits. One domestic shift should necessitate one total reconstruction of each level. Partitions should need to get removed. Fresh water schemes, pantries, showers, everything would need to be fitted. Vintage traits like hallways, stairs, and specific ornate parts would probably need to be saved. This board declined that offer. Saving laws favored keeping that vintage soul for historic towers. Shifting that Flatiron from bureaus toward homes would drastically alter its insides. That board claimed how that edifice had operated as one workplace tower since 1902. Such utility stood portion of its brand. Shifting would imply wiping that lineage. Macklowe eventually moved the asset. This math never did operate lacking one apartment shift. That tower yet yielded fee wealth, yet never sufficient to warrant those tens of millions called for to revamp these grids while maintaining it as workplace area. Fresh buyers should encounter that identical choice. During 2005, one fresh purchaser joined that scene. Sorgente Group, one Milanese land venture business, focused on buying vintage towers and renewing them. Folks viewed worth within symbols. Their collection contained assets throughout Europe plus those United States. This Flatiron matched their venture style, legendary masonry, one-top spot, and lengthy growth hope. Sorgente spent nearly $190 million for that monument during 2018, while precise tallies stay argued across diverse records. That cost mirrored both this worth for the soil and the tower's hope. This group declared schemes for one delicate renewal which might update grids while saving that vintage soul. Early checks showed hurdles more grave than folks anticipated. That ceramic skin remained splitting within numerous spots. Moisture had leaked via tiny holes for generations, harming that alloy skeleton past it. Certain metal girders displayed rust. Mending should necessitate stripping and swapping exterior parts level via level. Indoors, those utilities called for total overhaul: power, piping, warmth, airflow, plus cooling. Each part remained significantly vintage. Revamping would imply baring the internal frame and reconstructing from within whilst shielding the outer skin. That labor should prove intricate and slow. Bills stood initially projected at roughly $50 million. As surveyors probed further, that figure climbed. 80 million, 100 million. Definitive forecasts implied a thorough renewal might surpass $150 million. Combined with the buy price, the net stake would hit $350 million. Sentiente moved ahead. The group engaged a designer and technicians. They secured authorizations, they drafted a timeline. Labor was slated to commence during early 2019. Every occupant got notices. Folks had to vacate the tower briefly while renewal moved along. The business promised them folks could return once the project stood complete. During March 2019, the tower hollowed. The final occupants packed up their bureaus and shifted toward temporary spots. Certain intended returning. Others utilized that instance to locate current area in fresher towers. That Flatiron edifice, for the primary turn since 1902, stood silent. Staging climbed near the exterior. Building teams started work on the ceramics. Each tile called for separate rating. Fractured parts stood tagged for swap. That work felt sluggish. Artisans needed to match fresh pottery toward originals crafted 117 years prior. Hue, grain, size, everything had to stay identical. Locating firms capable of crafting replicas required months. Indoors, wrecking commenced in non-vital parts of the tower. Old partitions got pulled down, bearing the alloy skeleton. Vintage power cables were pulled out. Water tubes were chopped out. Those blueprints called for totally fresh grids crafted for the 21st age but fitting with the vintage frame. Subsequently, during March 2020, exactly one season following construction initiation, the COVID-19 outbreak hit Manhattan. Building lagged, then halted. Laborers got sent home. Equipment arrivals were stalled. This city closed non-vital building ventures for months. The Flatiron renewal remained frozen. The fiscal impacts for the outbreak reached far past that work site. Travel in Manhattan plummeted. Madison Plaza, usually crowded with guests filming the Flatiron, stood vacant. Trade land prices dipped as firms embraced off-site labor. Workspaces that had once been vital turned optional. Appetite for area in central Manhattan vanished. The Sorgente Group encountered a fiscal disaster. Its Italian lead firm had battled with arrears even prior to the outbreak. Quarantines made all worse. Wealth from its land collection fell heavily. Lenders started seeking back loans. During August 2020, that European-head corporation entered insolvency status. This Flatiron edifice became caught in legal stasis. That renewal halted. This tower remained hollow. Staging yet draped the exterior, that firm which owned the tower was now managed via insolvency courts in Italy. Lenders fought regarding assets. Future buyers rated whether the Flatiron was worth taking up. Considering all its tangled legal plus fiscal baggage, months turned into seasons. This tower stayed dim. New York's very legendary tower turned its most neglected. Guests still filmed it, yet now those shots revealed staging and fences instead of a living icon. One tower which had braved 117 years stood beaten not through age, but through cash. Section 4 for 7. Those years leading toward Sorgente's control were tagged via a chain of owners who each viewed the hope of the Flatiron Tower, but none located a gainful path to open it. Every buyer arrived via blueprints which eventually failed. That math stayed always the identical. The price to mend the tower exceeded what it might yield as workplace area. Homestyle conversion provided the peak return, but the New York City Landmarks Preservation Board halted those schemes. Harry Macklow attempted the apartment path first back during the late 1990s. His dream involved elite suites vending for millions per home. This spot in the very heart of Manhattan rendered the plan look doable, yet the board claimed the shift should ruin the tower's vintage soul. That choice remained final. Macklow had zero path of challenge. A later buyer weighed a boutique inn concept. Suites inside an iconic monument might fetch top prices. Guests were lulled toward the Flatiron uniquely, so why not permit them stay inside it? The idea made sales sense, yet it hit the identical legal blocks. Shifting an office inside toward hotel suites would call for big structural edits. That board would almost surely deny those blueprints as well. Meanwhile, the tower kept working as office area, yet the guest blend moved. Ancient groups which called for current utility exited. Tinier groups with small budgets moved in. Certain areas became leased toward startups plus artistic firms which prized the tag more than current perks. Remaining levels sat vacant for months. Fees might not be lifted high to fund the men bills the tower called for. Occupants paying market fees desired firm cooling, swift lifts, plus current web links. That Flatiron always provided zero for those items. Landlords kept fees fairly small to keep occupancy, yet that meant lease wealth never hit the high levels called for to fund a deep, broad renewal. This state formed a cruel loop. Delayed care damaged the tower's state. Fading states rendered it tougher to lure well-paying guests. Lessened lease wealth left fewer funds for men's. That downward flow remained slow but steady. By 2010, the ceramic skin called for instant care. Many tiles had dropped away, forcing the town to call for protective staging. That frame covered parts of the pavement near the tower, ensuring that falling shards would not hurt strollers. This staging was intended to be brief, yet it stayed for seasons as landlords delayed the pricey skin fixes. Inside, crises grew quietly. This power rig battled to manage rising draws. Grid failures hit several floors, occupants filed claims, landlords did band-aid fixes, yet they never solved the deep issues. Cabling fitted in 1902 had not been intended to aid hardware, hosts, and other gear pulling energy nonstop. This warmth, airflow, plus cooling rig became increasingly fickle. August warmth turned the top levels into kilns. January chills rendered some bureaus miserable despite active heat. Occupants bought small heaters plus blowers to aid the tower's weak rig. That was not a fix. It stood an admission of ruin. When Sorgente Group bought the tower in 2018, many folks within the land trade were doubtful. That buy price was high. This known renewal cost was vast. That hidden bill might be higher yet. But Sorgente had skill with tough vintage assets. They handled works others viewed impossible. They held access to cash via their Italian lead firm. Every part for triumph appeared to be ready. Checks following the buy showed the net scale of the crisis. This skin called for more than spot mends. Parts of ceramics had to be fully swapped. That alloy pass displayed rust that called for care. This labor meant placing staging near the net tower and moving level via level for months or years. That metal frame, while still basically firm, called for check and care. Technicians had to rate every beam plus post. Rust, if found, called for grit blasting and coating. Certain parts might call for bracing. 117 seasons of contact with wetness plus moving temps had left scars. Those bases stayed firm. The deep metal stakes placed within Manhattan stone during the early building still did their task. That stood a rare happy point in a long list of vital mends. The bottom needed zero work. Everything past it did. Sorgente made a deep renewal blueprint. Step 1 would fix the exterior, staging setup, check of each tile, swap of hurt parts, washing and care for the alloy frame. Step 2 would update power plus water grids, totally fresh lines, fresh tubes, fresh gears. Step 3 would fit a current HVAC rig, capable of yielding firm heat and moisture on each level. Step 4 would swap the lifts with newer, swifter units. Step 5 would rebuild inside zones, forming more fluid office schemes while saving vintage parts. That net project was gauged to last 3 toward 5 years. That cost, as said before, spanned from $50 million toward more than $100 million, based on what extra crises could show during the labor. Sorgente found cash both from its Italian lead firm and from lenders who saw worth in a well-done renewal of an iconic tower. By March 2019, each step was ready, permits given, builders hired, plans okayed, guests moved. That tower emptied for the primary turn in its life. Staging started rising along the skin. Teams hit work. Early gain was hopeful. Ceramic tiles were slowly pulled and sorted. Hurt ones stood tagged for swap. Solid ones were washed and kept for resetting. That alloy frame beneath was shown for the primary turn since 1902. Technicians ran checks. Bulk of the frame was in better shape than feared, though some spots called for care. Inside, wrecking moved in non-open zones. Old grids were pulled. Fresh ducts were set. Power rooms were cleared and set for current gear. This labor was foul, loud, and slow, but it moved per plan during those initial weeks. Then in March 2020, that pandemic halted everything. New York City hit lockdown. Building laborers were sent home. Work zones near the city went silent. This Flatiron joined thousands of rest ventures stuck in spot by a public health crisis. One pause meant to last weeks moved into months. Even once building began, caps on worker counts and safety rules slowed gain. Gear orders that should have arrived from near the globe were late or nixed. Trade nets broke. Plans became empty. But the outbreak's fiscal hit was far harsher for Sorgente than the building delays. Their land collection near Europe plus the United States hit sharp wealth drops. Bistros, retail units, and bureaus closed. Guests halted paying fees. Asset values dipped. One firm that had seemed cash stable in 2018 met a money crisis by mid-2020. Sorgente's Italian lead firm held heavy debt even prior to the outbreak. Lenders who had been calm in good cycles grew loud when wealth dipped. They sought pay. That firm lacked the cash. In August 2020, Sorgente SPA entered insolvency in Italy. This Flatiron edifice owned by a U.S. branch of Sorgente was dragged into those insolvency files. One court in Italy held power over that firm's goods. Lenders filed claims. Future buyers started hunting, judging whether the tower might be won at a discount from the failed firm. That renewal was never truly restarted. Certain work moved bit by bit, yet without firm cash and lead, gain remained tiny. This staging stayed. The tower stayed dim. That most filmed tower in Manhattan stood stuck, unable to move ahead, unable to return to what it once was, Section 5 for 7. That COVID-19 outbreak did not solely halt the Flatiron renewal. It altered the net math of trade land in New York City. Firms that once called for bureaus for each worker found that off-site labor worked better than folks had guessed. Talks moved over video. Files were shared via clouds. Output did not drop as harshly as bosses had feared. This fact had prompt effects. Groups that had formerly leased whole levels of office area started cutting their footprint. Certain leases were not kept, others were changed for smaller zones. Appetite for bureaus in central Manhattan fell sharply. Tower owners near the city watched empty rates climb to levels not seen in ages. For the Flatiron edifice, which already stood hollow, that hit was different but just as lethal. That tower's worth leaned on its hope to yield lease wealth. If that office scene was dying, then even a total fixed Flatiron would fight to find guests willing to pay those fees called for to fund the renewal bills. The math already tough in 2019 turned nearly impossible by 2021. Travel, the second vital part of the Flatiron's worth, similarly fell. Madison Plaza, usually packed with guests from near the world, cleared out. Bistros and inns closed. Remaining ones ran with sharply thinned wealth. This spot, one of the tower's top assets, lost worth when there stayed 0 guests. Insolvency files in Italy moved on through 2020 and 2021. That court managing the trial tried to fix the goods of Sorgente Group and share funds between lenders. This Flatiron tower held a big part of the collection's worth, but also a big debt. Any buyer should have to take on not solely the tower, but also the task of finishing the renewal. Lenders fought for spot. Some sought to force one prompt sale, even at a lower cost, to win back part of their cash. Others said that waiting should let the scene heal, maybe lifting worth. That insolvency court weighed both views but gave few final acts. That file sank into legal mud. Meanwhile, the tower stayed in suspension. This staging that was meant to be brief turned a fixed trait. First fitted to shield strollers during skin work, it now simply hid the tower while zero labor moved past it. This city called for it to stay in spot until the skin was fixed, but zero person could fund fixes during the legal war inside. One might say a tower froze midway via wrecking. Certain areas were bared down to that alloy skeleton. Rest stayed untouched exactly as guests had exited them in 2019. Tables still sat in some suites. File bins still held files. It appeared as if every person had gone out for food and never returned. Guarding the tower turned a crisis. One hollow tower in the heart of Manhattan lured unhoused folks seeking shelter, tag riders seeking a board, and thrill seekers chasing a bold trip. Those owners hired guards to watch the asset, yet shielding 22 levels 24 hours a day was costly. Alloy lids arrived over some gates to stop illegal entry. This city itself started to jump in. That Department of Buildings gave various fines linked to ignored mens. This ceramic skin kept fading. More tiles split. The risk of falling shards grew. This city warned fines if labor did not restart. But zero person had clear power to force a failed firm to act. The design world watched with rising dread. The Flatiron edifice was one of the most vital early tower icons in America. Its reach on design might not be overstated. Towers near the world copied its grit and merged form with task on tight sites. Letting it turn to ruin would be a loss not solely for Manhattan, but for global design lineage. Heritage groups studied whether help was doable. That National Trust for Historic Preservation named the Flatiron among endangered icons. Local groups checked whether funding could rescue the tower, yet the scale of cash called for was scary. $100 million or extra could not be won through gifts. Any fix would call for a private buyer with deep cash and a lengthy dream. Many future buyers ran due diligence. Each moved away after reading the math. The price of winning the tower, plus the price of finishing the renewal, plus the doubt of how fast it might be leased once done. Together, folks added up toward a formula that did not make fiscal sense, at least not for backers seeking fair yields within a fair time gap. By 2022, the state settled in the worst possible path. Nothing turned better, but nothing turned vastly worse either. That tower stood, the staging stood, the legal files moved along. Random talks between future buyers and the insolvency court led nowhere. The Flatiron edifice turned a symbol, frozen in time, unable to move ahead, refusing to vanish. Guests returning to New York as trips resumed still came to Madison Plaza. They filmed the tower as always, yet now these shots showed staging and fences. Souvenirs sold in nearby stores showed the Flatiron in its fame, with zero mention of its current state. That gap between shot and truth stood vivid. Local journals ran pieces every few months noting the lack of gain. Each piece said the identical tale with slightly varied points. That tower remained hollow. This insolvency file stayed open. Zero renewal was set. Future buyers were watching, but zero person was making a bid. That narrative was sadly steady. By 2023, fresh snags arrived. Certain lenders in the failure said that the long wait was cutting the asset's worth. The longer the tower stood hollow, the harder it turned to pack it with guests later. The New York office scene was not healing as fast as dreamers had guessed. Off-site labor stayed popular. Many groups fixedly cut their office area needs. One fresh round of talks began between the insolvency court and keen parties. Certain lenders sought to drop the asking cost to lure real buyers. Others fought the idea, saying that selling past worth would cheat the folks Sorgente owed. That court heard those views and weighed choices, but took few firm acts. In 2024, news broke that a group of New York builders was making a team to maybe buy the tower. That plan reportedly meant finishing the renewal and then shifting some levels to mixed utility, joining bureaus with art or school area. The Heritage Board should have to permit any shift, but early talks implied focus toward creative fixes, which might save the tower while letting it work gainfully. By the time this story was penned in early 2025, zero final pact had been told. That tower stayed in the grip of a body managed by the insolvency court in Italy. Talks moved on. Future buyers checked choices. The city gave fines. Heritage groups watched. And the Flatiron edifice stood still, its panes dark, its hallways hollow. The most famous symbol of Manhattan, caught in the longest pause it had ever experienced. Section 6 for 7. That emptiness for the Flatiron edifice shows a puzzle found in historic preservation. The tower got legal shield precisely since it counted artistically and socially. Historic rank was meant to grant its life. Rather, that shield made limits that rendered gainful utility almost unreachable. That tower cannot be leveled, but it similarly cannot be easily changed to current needs. The finances are harsh. A renovation that necessitates over $100 million must produce sufficient lease wealth to warrant the stake. Under peak sector states, workplace area within the Flatiron might fetch top-tier fees owing to its placement and status. However, the edifice fails providing what current businesses desire. Airy level schemes stay unreachable due to the three-sided math plus saving mandates linked toward keeping the hallway scheme. High-level digital utility would have to be squeezed into a tower drafted prior hardware, cooling, or current signal rigs. Even provided those engineering hurdles got solved, the topic for appetite persists. The after-outbreak workplace scene within New York City has basically shifted. Groups call for less area. Off-site labor has turned a fixed trait in numerous trades. Empty ratios and peak grade towers throughout Manhattan have climbed. Rivalry for guests is fierce. The Flatiron should be fighting against fresher towers, providing all the Flatiron misses at similar or perhaps cheaper fees. Domestic shift provided one possible fix, yet the New York City Landmarks Preservation Board has steadily denied such schemes. Those laws stay not random. They live to shield vintage traits from getting ruined in the sock of gain. The Flatiron has operated as an office tower starting 1902. Such constant of utility is itself vintage. Shifting the inside toward residences would wipe that lineage. This puzzle grows. The harshest shield forms the biggest hazard. One tower which cannot yield wealth finally fades. Regardless how many law papers shield it from wrecking, saving calls for care. Upkeep calls for cash. Cash arrives through utility. Provided laws render gainful utility unreachable, the monument gradually decays away. Various U.S. metros have battled with comparable crises. The Woolworth Tower, another early monolith in downtown Manhattan, endured seasons for fiscal hardship before a builder finally shifted the top levels into elite apartments in 2015. The board okayed that venture since the early tower had been drafted as a workplace edifice with homes aloft. One pattern lived. This Flatiron possessed zero such pattern. Different towns lost icons completely. The Singer Tower, once the loftiest edifice on Earth, got leveled in 1968 prior heritage laws might shield it. Pennsylvania Hub, per noted before, dropped during 1963. Such wrecking stunned general awareness and sparked the birth for the Heritage Board. Yet today, advocates encounter a distinct hurdle. Guarding towers against wrecking stood a triumph. Locating a path for these frames to exist fiscally is the tougher trial. Many gurus imply those laws call for change. Stern pressure of early utility can doom towers toward ruin through apathy. Agility might permit smart recycling, which saves the most vital vintage parts whilst letting monuments operate within a current wealth. Rest caution that excessive agility would lure builders to ruin the exact traits which rendered the towers worth guarding in the start. General grants provide another doable trail. States might aid the saving for socially superb towers via tax perks, awards, or straight cash. Manhattan possesses certain systems which aid icon mending, yet none work at the size called for to rescue anything like the Flatiron. $150 million is past what bulk state systems can fairly provide toward a private trade venture. State-corporate alliance styles have been studied. The town might assume grip of the tower, plus join with a private builder who would supply skill and portion of the funding and trade for lengthy lease rights or split control. Such setups have functioned elsewhere. This Flatiron's tangles, legal plus fiscal, have rendered deals like such tough to bargain. That concept for a gallery or social zone has appeared occasionally. Shifting the Flatiron into a gallery of design or Manhattan lineage would make iconic sense. This tower itself is one relic. Guests might witness a prior 20th age inside while discovering regarding the growth for high-rise building. Yet galleries call for steady running cash. Past wealth seldom meets total bills. Every gallery scheme should call for a fund or active aid capable of keeping labor for generations. One tiny inn stays a mental option. Guests are lulled toward the Flatiron. Permitting them rest inside it might yield wealth while saving parts of the tower's vintage soul. Inn suites would never call for airy level floors. Thin hallways would function nicely for an inn. Chambers might be tiny provided they remained smartly crafted. This hurdle would be coaxing the Heritage Board how InShift should save sufficient vintage truth. One mix joining varied goals might provide the most doable fix. Bottom levels might stay bureaus or turn social area. Center levels might turn an inn. Top levels, once the vistas stay most amazing, might possibly turn homes. Provided the board could be coaxed that small shift is vital for the tower's life, one varied use path would branch wealth flows plus cut the hazard of leaning on one solitary scene. Zero for these paths has been totally studied since control has stayed stuck within insolvency files. That judge in Italy managing Sorgente's goods cannot keep the tower indefinitely, yet it also cannot vend it till lenders hit pact. During the interim, this Flatiron stays silent, its tomorrow hazy. Lineage provides both alarms plus hope. Scores of towers have braved trials which appeared lethal. Mar-a-Lago, noted by the dawn of this story, encountered wrecking during the mid-1980s. Landlords could not locate a path to keep it fiscally. Wrecking teams stood set. That house lasted since someone discovered a style which functioned. Shifting into a personal club was debated, yet it yielded the wealth called for to keep the land. That gap resides in law. Mar-a-Lago never did encounter the limits for the Heritage Board. That master held the liberty to change the asset in a path that made fiscal sense. This Flatiron lacks not that agility. Its safety is similarly its cage. That humor is how the tower's celebrity might be precisely what blocks its life. Provided the Flatiron were less legendary, it might be updated or changed, lacking general gaze. Yet any offer including one of America's most famous towers lures notice, talk, and fight. Interest squads verify each blueprint gets checked. That Heritage Board must move carefully, aware its choices fix patterns. By 2025, that Flatiron edifice stayed in stasis. Tangibly, it yet exists, its alloy frame firm despite seasons of apathy. This ceramic skin is fading, yet sluggishly. This tower might last for ages in its present empty state. Yet endurance is not identical as vitality. That most filmed tower across Manhattan has turned a monolith toward its personal puzzle. Extra vital to permit fade, extra restricted to utility gainfully, extra famous to change softly, shielded via law which ensures its shape but not its destiny. Its void is both sorrow plus alarm. Symbols stay not endless. Glory does not fund upkeep costs. Safety lacking truth is solely a sluggish path to ruin. Should the Flatiron brave another age? Virtually surely. Should it ever exist once more as a working monument packed with folks and intent? That stays a hidden query. Amid those dual topics resides the rift between heritage and vitality. A rift which grows with each season. The monument stays dim and quiet, expectant for a fix that never appears to reach. Chapter 7 4.